Spock sighed. There was little to be gained from explaining that Sybok was an outcast, his very existence expunged from all public records on Vulcan. Technically, you are correct, Captain. I do not have a brother.
I knew it.
I have a half-brother. Kirk's anger surrendered to confusion.
I need to sit down.
He plopped down heavily beside McCoy. The doctor frowned quizzically and said,
"Now, let me get this straight, Spock. You and Sybok have the same father, but different mothers."
"Correct, Doctor. Sybok's mother was a Vulcan priestess. After her death, Sybok and I were raised as brothers." Kirk's expression was now one of intense interest.
"Spock, why didn't you tell us this before?"
I was not prepared to discuss matters of such a personal nature. For that, I am sorry. Kirk considered this and relented.
"I guess we've got bigger problems to solve, such as how we're going to get out of here."
The doctor turned to Spock.
"I'll just say this, Spock. You never cease to amaze me."
"Nor I myself, Doctor." Alone on the bridge, Chekhov tried vainly to raise someone, anyone, on the hangar deck. Clearly, something had gone very, very wrong with the landing party's mission. The lift doors snapped open behind him. Chekhov jumped from the command chair and wheeled around. At the sight of Sulu and Uhura, he grinned.
"Thank God! I was beginning to worry. Where is the captain?"
His relief vanished abruptly as Sybok strode onto the bridge, followed by the three hostages, Dar, Talbot, and Cord, and several armed soldiers. The soldiers aimed their weapons at Chekhov. To his horror, Chekhov saw that Sybok, the diplomats, Sulu, and Uhura all wore the same faintly psychotic smile. Sulu took his seat at the helm and began to program in commands. Aghast, Chekhov turned to him.
"Sulu, what are you doing?"
Sulu smiled serenely. His attention never wavered from his console. "Plotting our new course."
"New course, Sulu? You have no authority."
"Pavel, please listen to what Sybok has to say." Suddenly, the Vulcan was standing next to Chekhov, close enough to rest a hand upon his shoulder. "I don't want to force you. The decision must be yours." The bridge faded. Chekhov's awareness dimmed until he saw nothing but the Vulcan's dark eyes. They seemed ancient, wise, and strangely sad. Chekhov tried to protest angrily, but his own voice sounded weak and very far away.
"What have you done to my friends?"
He felt the touch of a fever-warm hand upon his brow. The Vulcan spoke. "Each of us hides a secret pain. Share yours and gain strength from the sharing." Outside the cell where Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were imprisoned, a monitor screen on the security terminal flickered to life. It revealed a disturbing scene on the Enterprise bridge. Sybok in the command chair, flanked by his loyal followers, Chekhov, Uhura, and Sulu. Kirk stepped as close to the terminal as possible without touching the glowing force field that held him prisoner.
"My crew! The bastards brainwashed my crew!"
Sybok spoke with a voice that was melodic and compelling.
"Brave crew of the Enterprise,
consider the questions of existence. Who am I? Why am I here? Does God exist? These are the questions all beings have asked since they first gazed up at the stars and dreamed. My Vulcan ancestors believed in a place where all these questions of existence could be answered. Modern dogma, of course, tells us this place is a myth. I tell you that it exists, my friends. We have been chosen to undertake the greatest adventure of all time. Our destination, the planet Shakari. It lies beyond the Great Barrier at the center of our galaxy.
His image faded into darkness. Alarmed, Kirk wheeled around to face Spock. Spock, the center of the galaxy can't be reached. Everyone knows that. The radiation is far too intense. No probe has ever returned. The ship simply isn't constructed to withstand it. The Vulcan's tone was calm, but there was a faintly troubled look in his eyes. Certainly, Sybok's actions and beliefs are bizarre by any standards. And yet, he possesses the keenest intellect I have ever known. Perhaps. Kirk interrupted at the faint sound that came from the back wall of the brig. What's that? Spock tilted his head and listened. Morse code, Captain. Kirk crouched next to him. You're right, Spock. Let's see. That's an S. The next letter is a T. A. N. D. End of word. McCoy put it together. Stan, what kind of a message is that? Kirk gestured for silence. New word. B. A. Spock finished. C. K. The doctor grinned, pleased with himself for solving the riddle. Back. Stand back. Now that makes sense. Kirk and Spock looked at each other in horror. A panel of the wall exploded into shrapnel. Kirk dove for cover. When he opened his eyes, he saw Engineer Scott's head and shoulders poking through the smoking opening. Well, what are ya three waiting for? Dinna ya recognize a jailbreak when ya see one? Scott led Kirk, Spock, and McCoy to an unused turboshaft, then left to get the transporter working. McCoy tilted his head all the way back and gazed up the claustrophobically narrow shaft. It stretched up into infinite darkness, and the only way up was a flimsy emergency ladder. Even Kirk seemed somewhat taken aback, but he began to climb. Reluctantly, the doctor followed. Hand over hand, he pulled himself up the ladder. He tried to stay close to the heels of Kirk's boots, but before long the captain was several meters ahead of him, disappearing into the darkness. McCoy sucked in air like a drowning fish. His arms began to tremble with fatigue.
Jim, slow down. This is going to take me forever.
Kirk stopped and peered down at McCoy.
Bones, where's Spock?
Struggling against vertigo, McCoy glanced down. Below them, the shaft descended into darkness. Spock was nowhere to be seen. Had the Vulcan fallen without so much as a sound? McCoy looked up, startled. Spock eased slowly down the shaft, wearing levitation boots, the type used by tourists for sightseeing. He floated down to Kirk's level and hovered there. I believe I have found a faster method, Captain. Kirk grinned. He stepped off the ladder and grabbed hold of Spock. Together they dipped down a few feet, then rose until they were beside McCoy.
Come on, Bones. All aboard.
McCoy squeezed his eyes shut, then grabbed onto Kirk and Spock. He did not fall, but felt himself begin to sink gently downward. McCoy opened his eyes. Next to him, Kirk tensed. McCoy followed the captain's gaze downward.
There!
Sulu pointed up at them. At first, McCoy smiled with relief until he saw that the search party with Sulu was composed not of Enterprise crew members, but of Sybok soldiers. McCoy caught a glimpse of the helmsman's face and realized with a shudder that Sulu wasn't really Sulu anymore. As the three continued to sink downward, Kirk hissed into Spock's ear.
Spock! The booster rockets!
The Vulcan hesitated.
If I activate them, we will be propelled upward at an unpredictable velocity. If we collide with the shaft ceiling...
But Kirk was in no mood for arguments.
Fire the boosters! Spock, now!
The Vulcan complied. They were hurled upward. The ladder whizzed past him at vertiginous speed. McCoy cried out and held onto Spock and Kirk for all he was worth. They stopped with a sickening lurch.
I am afraid I overshot our mark by 1 level.
McCoy laughed shakily.
What the heck, Spock? Nobody's perfect.
Spock carried them to the shaft exit. McCoy was gratified to discover they were in the corridor, directly outside the forward observation deck. Once inside, Spock moved swiftly to the communications console and activated it.
Emergency channel open, Captain.
Kirk stepped up to the console. To anyone within the sound of my voice, this is Captain James T. Kirk of the Federation starship Enterprise. If you read me, acknowledge. Enterprise, this is Starfleet Command. We can barely read you. Over. Kirk raised his voice. A hostile force has seized control of our vessel and put us on a direct course with the Great Barrier. Our heading is 000, Mark II. Request emergency assistance. Acknowledge. Acknowledged, Enterprise. We are dispatching a rescue ship immediately. Roger, Starfleet. Kirk out. Kirk closed the channel and shared a hopeful look with his friends. Aboard the Klingon bird of prey, Vixis spoke into the subspace transmitter. Starfleet out! Her standard accent was flawless. The humans had been completely fooled. Triumphantly, she looked at her captain. The fire in Claw's eyes told her that he was willing to risk death and more.
Where Kirk goes, we follow.
Yes, my lord. Vixis sighed and watched the star pattern change on her viewer as Okrona came hard about and swooped after her prey. As Kirk, McCoy, and Spock prepared to leave the observation deck, Sybok and his soldiers confronted them. Spock's half-brother smiled faintly at the startled looks on his prisoners' faces.
I trust your message was received.
Kirk moved forward to confront him, which caused the soldiers to raise their weapons and take aim. I won't stand by while you take Enterprise into the Great Barrier. Commit suicide if you want, but do it without my ship and crew. Sybok's smile faded at last.
What you fear, Captain Kirk, is the unknown. The people of Earth once believed their world to be flat. Columbus proved it was round. They said no vessel could travel faster than the speed of light until warp drive was discovered. The Great Barrier represents the ultimate expression of this fear of the unknown. It is an expression of personal fear.
That's insane, Sybok. We're not talking about psychology. We're talking about physical fact. Intense gravitation. Intense radiation will hurt you, whether you're afraid of them or not. Enough people have died proving it. Uhura's voice came over the intercom.
Sybok, this is the bridge. We are in approach of the Great Barrier.
Beyond the observation window, the starlight was fading, swallowed up by a bright reddish-pink glow. Sybok rose, his face alive with excitement. I'm afraid you three will have to remain here. He headed for the exit. Kirk started to follow, but was blocked by the guards. Kirk shook his head. You are insane. The fiery look in Sybok's eyes could have been confidence or total madness. Am I? I'll see you on the other side. Seated at the helm, Sulu stared in awe at the fierce and beautiful sight on the main view screen. The bridge glowed with the reflected brilliance of 1,000 stars as the ship made her way through areas of stellar birth, through expanding blast waves from dying stars. Sulu trusted Sybok utterly, yet, at the same time, his rational mind knew that Enterprise's shields could not withstand the enormous onslaught of radiation from the galactic center. He glanced back at the Vulcan, who sat in the command chair, staring intently at the display of light and color on the screen. We're all mad, Sulu thought, as he looked back at the screen. Behind him, Uhura gasped softly. The screen dimmed. Directly before them, a great black thundercloud of gas and dust reared its head. It was simply an accretion disk, an accumulation of stellar matter, yet the cloud seemed malignant, evil. The view screen went blank. Chekhov gazed down at his console.
Radiation levels were off the scale. Now the circuits have overloaded. We have no instrument readings.
Sulu turned to face the Vulcan. They say no ship can survive it. Sybok rose. I say they're wrong. Full ahead, Mr. Sulu. Sulu paused as, within him, fear struggled against trust. Full ahead. Aye. Enterprise leapt into the abyss. On the forward observation deck, Jim Kirk stood with his friends and watched in helpless rage as Enterprise sailed into the barrier. Kirk saw the approaching darkness in the form of a huge, slightly irregular ring. The sight of it repelled him. It seemed hideous, malignant. Enterprise sailed into the heart of it. The room went black. Certain he was about to die, Kirk was filled with an unfamiliar blind panic. He reached out, wanting to say a final word of comfort to his friends, and caught hold of nothing. Suddenly, brightness streaked through the dust ring like lightning through a roiling thundercloud. The brilliance grew. It was as if Enterprise were caught in the midst of an incredible electrical storm. Yet she sailed smoothly through the turbulence, as if it were empty space. The cloud thinned and parted to reveal an area of utter calm, like the peaceful eye at the center of a hurricane. In the midst of this serene space cape, a single white dwarf star was orbited by a lone blue-green planet. Spock's mask of self-control had slipped. He stared in frank amazement. McCoy smiled at the vision of beauty before them. But Kirk was more skeptical. Spock, could it be an illusion? Possibly. The bridge's sensors should be able to tell us. Then we'll go to the bridge and find out. McCoy shot him a look of disbelief.
The guards aren't exactly gonna let us walk out of here, Jim.
Kirk smiled. They might, if we invite them along.
Kirk and his friends arrived on the bridge to find the atmosphere one of exultation. At the sight of Kirk, Sybok stepped down from the command chair and gestured for the captain to take his place. Captain Kirk, perhaps now you believe me when I say I mean no harm to the Enterprise and her crew. My mission is fulfilled. I return control of your vessel to you. Kirk moved eagerly toward the con, then hesitated. What makes you think I won't just turn us around? Because, James Kirk, you too must know and understand. A starship's purpose is to explore the mysteries of space, and now Enterprise is poised on the edge of the greatest frontier of all. Kirk looked about at the bright, hopeful faces of his crew. Then if we're going to do it, we're going to do it by the book. Chekhov, take the con. Sulu, standard orbital approach. Kirk turned to Sybok, who stood smiling at him. Well, don't just stand there, Sybok. God's a very busy man. Aboard the shuttlecraft Copernicus, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Sybok descended into the mysterious planet's atmosphere. The entire landscape was aglow with primary colors of unearthly brilliance. Sybok stretched out an arm and pointed at the scenery below. There! That's it! In the distance, a series of blue-violet peaks formed a perfect circle. Copernicus descended gently and came to a rest outside the ring of mountains. Sybok, Spock, Kirk, and McCoy exited the craft and made their way into the ring. Its center was a roughly hewn crater. The effect was that of a naturally formed amphitheater. Spock lifted the tricorder that dangled from his neck and scanned the bowl of the crater. Fascinating. A force seems to be emanating from a point several kilometers below the surface. The readings are... He broke off as the crater rumbled mightily. A shadow fell over the amphitheater as the sky darkened from an onrush of jet-colored clouds. The earth began to undulate, swelling and rippling like a storm-ravaged sea. Along the crater's outer perimeter, a pillar of sheer rock ripped its way through the barren surface and hurtled skyward. Another pillar reared up, and another, until the crater's basin was encircled by gigantic fingers of stone. The fingers interlaced to form a shrine, a crude cathedral of rock. Abruptly, the earth ceased its torment, but the ground in the center of the shrine began to glow a dull, deep red. The earth melted, and the molten rock began to swirl in a spiral motion. There came the rushing sound of a great and terrible wind. A brilliant beam of pure force exploded out of the vortex and burst upward in an erupting geyser of light. A voice of infinite power, infinite grandeur spoke. Brave souls, welcome. A shaft of light throbbed. The dust within began to swirl and form shapes of all the gods and goddesses known throughout the galaxy. At last, the different faces of God merged into the one. Its face and form glowed, illumined by internal light, as it addressed Sybok. It is I, the One, the source of all. The journey you took to reach me could not have been an easy one. You are the first to find me. How did you breach the barrier? Sybok wondered why the Almighty would ask a question to which it knew the answer. Nevertheless, he replied, With a starship. The One brightened considerably. And this starship, it could carry my wisdom back beyond the barrier? Sybok was utterly seduced by a glorious vision of his destiny.
He alone had been chosen to reveal the Almighty to the galaxy. Yes, it could. It will be your chariot. But Jim Kirk had heard just about enough. Excuse me, what does God want with a starship? Rather than answer him, the being addressed Sybok.
Bring the ship closer to me.
You didn't answer my question. What does God want with a starship? If you're omnipotent, why not cross the barrier yourself? The shimmering dust in the energy beam began to swirl faster. Kirk realized he had made it angry, but he stood his ground. The being, whatever it was not getting aboard the Enterprise, not without a fight. The being's benevolent smile began to sag.
Who is this creature?
Don't you know? Aren't you supposed to be God? The sky overhead darkened. Thunder rumbled faintly.
Do you doubt me?
I need proof. The being's face contorted with anger.
Then here is the proof you seek.
A bolt of energy shot from the being's eye and struck Kirk, knocking him to the ground. Spock stepped forward to confront the being.
You have not answered his question. What does God want with a starship?
A second bolt of energy streamed from the being's eye and hurled Spock to the ground. The being turned to McCoy.
And you, do you also doubt me?
Crouched beside his wounded friends, McCoy glared angrily at the being. I doubt any god who inflicts pain for his own pleasure. The being prepared to lash out again, but Sybok spread out his arms and stepped in front of McCoy. Stop! The god of Shakari would not do this! The sound of the being's demonic laughter was unbearable. Sybok covered his ears with his hands, trying to blot it out.
An eternity I've been imprisoned in this place. The ship! I must have the ship! Give it to me, or I will kill you all!
Sybok was utterly desolate. His vision had been nothing but a delusion. But there was one small shred of meaning left. The fact that he loved his younger brother and did not want to see him perish at the hands of this evil creature. He addressed the being. Reveal yourself to me. I must see you as you really are. The being's features wavered. When at last they resolved themselves, the face was a sinister reflection of Sybok's own. He shrank from it, repelled. The being laughed scornfully.
What's wrong? Don't you like this face? I have so many. But this one suits you best.
Anguished, Sybok turned toward his brother. Spock, this is my doing. My arrogance, my vanity. Save yourselves. He drew in a deep breath, summoning all his power, then faced his evil image without hope, without joy, without fear. I couldn't help but notice your pain.
Pain?
It runs deep. As Sybok probed the outer reaches of the creature's mind, he sensed a loneliness beyond all light, beyond all comprehension. Share your pain with me. He stepped into the swirling beam of power and embraced his foe. With McCoy's help, Kirk held Spock back as Sybok entered the energy shaft. Spock stopped struggling and watched the incredible spectacle.
Within the shimmering matrix, the two Syboks, the good and its evil parody, wrestled, merging into one distorted, thrashing body. The two grappling forms began to whirl, spiraling downward into the bottomless hole created by the being's exit. Kirk raised his communicator to his lips. Kirk to Enterprise. Sulu here, Captain. Sulu, ready a photon torpedo. Fire on my command. Aye, sir. Kirk held his breath. Sybok and the demon were still spiraling downward. After a few seconds, the two disappeared into the dark tunnel. The captain shouted into his communicator. Sulu, fire directly into the tunnel. Send it down. Now! Sulu responded. A bolt of red streaked from the sky and descended into the dark shaft. Far beneath the surface, the torpedo found its mark. A searing blaze of light and raw energy erupted from the tunnel. Then disappeared, leaving behind smoke and rubble. The shaft of light had vanished. In its place, the gaping mouth of the tunnel gleamed a dull, angry red. Spock stared, dazed, at the glowing wound in the earth as he whispered his brother's name. Sybok. An ominous rumble came from deep within the tunnel. Kirk called out to his friends. We've got to get out of here! The three of them ran up the side of the crater and through the narrow mountain pass. Kirk reached the shuttle first and opened the hatch. The three of them entered, McCoy last, grazed by the lowering hatch as it closed, sealing them inside. Kirk shouted to his first officer, Spock, get us out of here! Spock touched the thruster controls as the shuttle convulsed under the impact of an enormous blow. The entity had followed and was trying to force its way inside. Kirk turned in time to see a large welt appear in the bulkhead. Spock tried once more. The dials on the control console flashed brilliant red, then went dark. Thrusters inoperative, Captain. Kirk pulled out his communicator and hailed the Enterprise. Scotty, now would be a good time to tell me the transporter's working.
She's got partial power, sir. I might be able to take two of you.
Beam Spock and Dr. McCoy up. Now! McCoy and Spock dissolved into the shimmer of the beam, then reappeared in the Enterprise transporter room. Spock stepped from the platform and moved over to the transporter console, manned by Montgomery Scott. Mr. Scott, send the beam back down. Suddenly, the Enterprise reeled. The transporter platform rained sparks. In the confusion, Spock retained enough clarity of mind to realize three things. First, that the Enterprise was under attack. Second, that she would have to raise shields. And third, with the ship's shields up and the transporter apparently damaged, there was no way to beam James Kirk to safety. Kirk waited inside the groaning craft. Mr. Scott! Static. He tried again. Copernicus was shaking so hard the communicator almost slipped from his fingers. Scotty! You'd better be there! Centimeters behind his head, the thick, unbreakable polymer of the starboard hatch shattered into pieces. A thick, crude limb of molten rock and fire forced its way through the opening. Within seconds, the creature would make its way to the very spot where Kirk was sitting. Kirk scrambled to the aft hatch and forced it open, making his escape just as the creature burst inside. Spock and McCoy arrived on the bridge as the auxiliary control hummed on and the last of the fires was being put out. The three diplomats, Dar, Talbot, and Cord, were huddled quietly out of the way. Spock had mastered his grief over Sybok's death and achieved singleness of focus. He would do whatever was necessary to save Jim Kirk and the Enterprise. Commander Uhura, status report. Mr. Spock, apparently the Klingon vessel has been pursuing us. Somehow, we failed to detect them. The Klingon captain wishes to name his terms. On screen, Commander. An image formed on the view screen. An arrogant young Klingon, arms folded smugly across his chest.
This is Kla, of the bird of prey, Okrona. You are alive for a single reason. The criminal, James T. Kirk. Hand him over, and I will spare your lives.
Captain Kirk is not with us. He is on the planet's surface.
Kla lunged forward threateningly. Then, give me his coordinates.
Spock experienced a sudden flash of inspiration. He swiveled in his chair to face the diplomats. General Cord, I am in need of your assistance. The old Klingon glanced up, startled.
My assistance?
You are his superior officer. Cord shook his head.
I can do nothing. I am no more than a foolish old man.
Spock had just seen his brother killed. He would not allow James Kirk to suffer a similar fate. Sybok was my brother. He sacrificed himself so that we might escape. Are you so willing to see his death become meaningless? Compassion dawned on Cord's wrinkled features.
I am sorry. Your brother helped me in dealing with my personal grief, and I am grateful he saved our lives. But Kla will not.
Spock interrupted in a tone that was deliberate and deadly soft.
Damn you, sir. You will try.
On the planet's surface, Kirk scrambled amid the smoldering ruins of the stone amphitheater. What remained of the trapped alien life form, now released from its imprisonment, moved slowly in a terrifying molten form, its energies ebbing, inexorably forcing Kirk up the mountain. There was no place to go but up. Kirk began to climb, grasping with mindless desperation at the rock. At last he made it, gasping to the top. At that moment, with a horrible counterfeit of its god face, the creature demanded from Kirk one last time the ship. Kirk looked down at his options. On one side of the mountain, the creature continued to climb, slowly, deliberately after him. The other side was a sheer, impassable cliff. Kirk realized he was trapped. He heard a sound overhead, a ship slicing through the atmosphere. He glanced up, hoping to see Galileo miraculously repaired and coming to his rescue. Instead, he saw a Klingon bird of prey. It dropped out of the racing storm clouds and fired at the creature with a phaser barrage, exploding the creature into fragments which scattered into the night sky. The Klingon bird of prey descended further and hovered over Kirk. He shouted defiantly, "So, it's me you want, you Klingon bastards! Come and get me!" The sky wavered, then disappeared in the uncertain sparkle of a transporter beam. Kirk materialized in the transporter room of the bird of prey and was immediately seized by two guards who dragged him onto the bridge. Kirk caught sight of a surprisingly familiar face off to one side of the cramped bridge, General Cord, who beamed with pride. Next to him stood a disgruntled young Klingon who wore the insignia of a bird of prey captain. Yet there was someone else sitting in the captain's chair. Kirk stepped toward it. As he neared, the chair swiveled toward him revealing its occupant. Kirk gasped.
Spock!
Welcome aboard, Captain.
Spock! I thought I was going to die.
Surely by now, Captain, you realize that your friends would never permit such a thing. Overwhelmed by relief and gratitude, Kirk stepped forward and clasped his friend in a hug. Spock stiffened. Captain, please, not in front of the Klingons. Kirk only hugged harder and laughed until the tears came. The following day, Kirk stood before the observation window on the Enterprise with McCoy and Spock. He followed their gazes to the planet beyond. Cosmic thoughts, gentlemen? Spock's tone was matter-of-fact, free from any trace of sorrow. I was thinking of Sybok. Kirk laid a hand lightly on the Vulcan's arm. I lost a brother once, but I was lucky. I got him back. Without changing his expression, the Vulcan managed to convey the impression of a smile. McCoy glanced warmly at them both. But Jim, I thought you once said men like us don't have families. Kirk smiled at the doctor. I was wrong.
In many ways, the recent events leading up to Sybok's death have allowed me to reclaim his memory. After the passage of so much time, I had expected the emotional barrier between myself and my brother to stand. But upon confronting Sybok again, I experienced afresh allegiance to the captain and the Enterprise crew was gravely tested. Now that Sybok is gone, I have at last achieved a sense of peace. While it is true that Sybok was grievously misguided, even deluded, his actions ultimately brought about great good. Not only did he sacrifice himself to save my life, as well as the lives of my friends, but the after effects of his mind melds with his prisoners have been entirely positive. The diplomats, Caitlin Dar, Talbot, and Cord, have pledged to henceforth devote themselves to improving conditions on Nimbus 3, to show their governments that the concept of peaceful coexistence can work. They do so in honor of Sybok and the good he has brought into their lives. It seems that my brother did not die in vain. Perhaps someday, in the not-so-distant future, there will be peace throughout the galaxy, and Sybok's vision of paradise will become a reality.
Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Story by William Shatner and Harve Bennett and David Lowry. Audio adaptation by J.M. Dillard. This program is read by George Takei, with Leonard Nimoy as the voice of Spock. Mix engineering and sound design was by Karen Perlman, with sound effects by Gary Fink. Voice recording was by Chris Solom. Music was composed and performed by Richard Emmett, Carl Schurtz, and Sam McCalley. Theme music from the Star Trek television series, composed by Alexander Courage and Gene Roddenberry, was used courtesy of Bruin Music. Production coordinator was Elisa Shokoff. Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, was directed by Audrey Coleman and produced by Susan Perrin.